A time to be born, a time to die. A time to plant, a time to reap. A time to kill, a time to heal, a time to laugh, a time to weep. A time to build up, a time to break down. A time to dance, a time to mourn. A time to cast away stones, a time to gather stones together. I imagine a good many of you, maybe all of you, will find these words memorable. Pete Seeger wrote them in the 60s, and the Byrds recorded them shortly thereafter, turning these verses into musical gold. Pete had help, though, as these words were entirely inspired by the book of Ecclesiastes. And the verses in Ecclesiastes go, "For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing." Turn, turn, turn. In about 7 weeks, the calendar year of 2019 will wrap up, and we will turn the pages to a new year, 2020. A full 365 days will be winding down. That is 4 full meteorological and astronomical seasons coming to a close. It seems that throughout human history there has been a fascination with cycles and time. Movies and song both have delved into the mysterious concept, and it should come as little wonder. From the most infinitesimal units to the unimaginably large precept of eternity, humans have tried to capture the tick-tock of a beginning and an end, an alpha and an omega. For most of us mortals, however, time is a constant beat that signals a finite period in which something or many somethings need to be accomplished. And for most of us mortals, that beat slowly picks up in speed as we age. A race to finish a constantly changing to-do list. Seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, centuries, and millennium. These are the accepted units by which we live. Buried within those segments are phases such as youth, middle, and old age. Playing alongside of those stages are the seasons. Calendar seasons are broken down into 4 major subgroups: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. And these are often used to metaphorically describe human aging. Humans are often poetically described in dawn and twilight terms. We all know that our physical existence has a beginning and an end, and all of us sitting here today are somewhere in between those 2 extremes. What it is that we do with the time that God has given us is a matter of free will and basic choices. The church certainly recognizes phases and stages. Our first reading today came to us from the rarely read Malachi, the final book of the chronological Old Testament, with a stark reminder of consequences that await our decisions and choices. From what I read, Malachi apparently means messenger in Old Hebrew, and is thought in this book of the Old Testament is thought to be a wake-up call for lazy behavior, a final message from an uber-active Old Testament full of stories of morality and the tremendous rewards for being faithful followers of God and the enormous punishments for those who do not. 2 Thessalonians paints a bit of a more gentle picture. In fact, it's even like a thank you of sorts for those same followers who are sticking with the faith through thick and thin. In the gospel, Jesus is looking at the big picture about what awaits beyond normal time, to an hour that only God knows. But Jesus tells us, just be patient, behave yourself, and all will be well. Next week, we mere mortals reach the end of another cycle of seasons by recognizing the infinite nature of Christ the King. And immediately following that, we begin the church cycle all over again with Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Easter, and finally Pentecost, also known as ordinary time. The 6 seasons of the church. It is interesting that we divide the seasons in our minds with colors that match the spirit of a particular season. And this is true of the calendar season, well as the church seasons. I think all of us have a particular affinity for this season or that, less for others. It's a natural part of our DNA. What I find equally natural is our fondness, or not, for looking back to see where and how far we have come by remembering events, conversations, and special moments that made the preceding 12 months memorable for whatever reason. They are usually not all good or all bad. They happened, and nothing can erase that. Sometimes they are fun to remember, and sometimes they leave a sense of sadness and emptiness. Regardless, they are like a stake in the ground that marks a point in time from which the next series of events begins to spread out. The media loves, and I think we all have a certain fun with top 10 lists that summarize the recent past. In my youth, I used to enjoy hearing countdowns of hit songs ranking from low to high, and movies often get the same treatment. When we hear from select critics as they pick their top movies of a given year, and I have to admit, I equally enjoy hearing the Razzie versions, the worst. I actually like those better. Media outlets often discuss the top news stories and their impacts. We hear about the man of the year or the woman of the year. We hear looking back on food and sports, etc., etc. And all of these lists reawaken memories that had gone to the back of the line. But isn't it kind of fun to hear a story we had forgotten or a song we had forgotten? Life gets so busy and so many things take up space in our finite brains that it is all but impossible for the normal of us to recall everything. Yet, that is exactly what end-of-the-year summaries do for us. I was kind of curious. I went to an Episcopal website for news, and I found some items I had not heard, and probably because a good number of them were local to where they were occurring. But I thought I would share some of what the rest of the Episcopal world is doing. I read that upcoming next year, second Monday of October, starting next year, the Episcopal Church is going to recognize the Indigenous Peoples Day. That was kind of cool. I'd not heard that. I got a kick when I read that during the World Series, the bishops of Washington and Houston waged their own wager of who was going to win. I was like, yeah.
What were the stakes?
I think it had to do with like a pizza lunch or something to that effect, if I remember correctly. But that was cool. Even our bishops get into this. There was an executive council meeting in Montgomery, Alabama during the summer that centered on racism as a theme. Cool. The Connecticut diocese is considering replacing deaneries with missionaries. Interesting. There was a global action summit at Grace Episcopal Church in San Francisco. Cool. Massachusetts has a pet ministry for therapy dogs. I bet that would work well here, wouldn't it? So these were just different stories of what happened in 2019 that I thought, I hadn't heard, but I thought, that's kind of neat. Look what others are doing with their evangelism. It's easy to get caught up in the almost daily barrage of bad news and negative perspective that bombard us. Most of the stories that I just related to you I found uplifting, and one of the stories I read about the back-to-back shootings in Texas and Ohio back in the summer, as horrific as that was, the stories that I read through the news cycle and the Episcopal website had seeds of hope because they focused on how the communities responded and joined together in that time of horrific crisis. The church year begins with Advent, a season of reflection before we resume down the road to what is coming. And when I began to prepare this sermon, the idea struck me that this is not unlike how we begin almost any event, with a prayer. whether they're school prayers, athletic event prayers, vestry prayers, or how we begin our weekly Mass with a prayer. Advent is like a 4-week-long lead-in prayer where we reflect on where we have been and where we might wish to go. I used to think Advent was a bit of a downer, but I've come to realize that I probably wasn't quite looking at this correctly. Like any journey, we cannot expect to arrive at the destination if we don't stop to rest and recenter ourselves, check the map, re-gauge, and begin to plan again. And I think that is exactly what Advent is trying to do for us. While year-end lists are a great way to evaluate and remember where our journey has taken us, like the sights we have seen and the places we have visited physically or spiritually, and the people that have graced us, we just recently paid homage to friends and family now departed on All Souls Day, those people who made a positive impact on our lives, people who allowed us to travel, re-gauge, and begin again. They reached the finish line. Now the question is, are we where we want to be? My youngest boy was deployed to the Eastern Pacific this past week. And I was fortunate enough to spend 24 hours with him a couple of weeks ago. Matthew is 26 and still a baby in my heart, but old enough for me to know that he is a good young man. It was hard for me not to reflect on what I was doing at his age, roughly a quarter century ago. I was behaving in a pretty selfish and destructive manner, if truth be told. Drugs and alcohol had just about completely consumed me at the age that he is now. And while I thought a good deal about all the adventures I have lived throughout my life and how not quite everything went according to plan, because clearly God had other ideas. And isn't that always the way? No matter how far down the road we get, God always has a plan. The only real fatherly advice I felt I could offer my boy was to live his life, live his adventure, have no regrets. Be fearless, not reckless. Whatever he chooses to do with the time he has to do it with passion, not half-heartedly, not scared about what might be. And while it might not seem like it now, soon enough he will realize, just like the rest of us have, that time speeds up as we age. There is never as much time as we think. Our internal clocks tick louder, which is our brain reminding us that we have a time limit. I seem to have a lot of time these days to think and think back. Was I a good father in the recent past? A good friend? Was I a respectful co-worker? Did I act in a way that Jesus would be proud? Jesus came into the world and died for us and will come again. And in the meantime, have I fully let Jesus into my heart and into my soul? Did I plant and reap, laugh and mourn? Did I heal? And have I done anything to help someone else heal? Did I cast away stones by forgiving others and allowing myself to be forgiven? All good questions as we enter a new church year. But really and truly, these are not questions that should be saved for the end. It's not like I know the end or when it will be. Have I truly been a good and responsible Christian? In today's gospel, Jesus delivers a rather unsettling account of what is to come. Wars, earthquakes, famines, and so on, which are a part of the continuing cycle of events that have gone on since the beginning of human history. Jesus said, "These things must come to pass first, but the end will not come immediately." In other words, it is normal. It is all supposed to be. Just do what you are supposed to do. God will present us with the wisdom we need to prevail, and if you do prevail, not a hair of your head shall be lost. Between Jesus' words and Malachi's verbal whip, we have the encouragement to do what needs to be done to resume our journey down the road. And so a solar cycle is wrapping up and a new one will begin. Remember, recenter, resume. Each in equal parts. Even the sad moments have a part to play in our spiritual development. The Father has chosen our hour. We are free to go out and do whatever good works we can. In the late 1700s, a Scottish bloke wrote a short piece that some of you most likely remember. It is sung as an ode to a year just past, or most any other occasion where a farewell is themed. And I bet every time that God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit hear it, they break out in smiles. And it goes, should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old Lang Syne. And surely you'll be your pint stoup, and surely I'll be mine. For old Lang Syne, my dear, for old Lang Syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old Lang Syne. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.